Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the August meeting of the Somerset West Planning Committee. We are not expecting a fire drill today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave the buildings by the two doors marked with the green exit sign and assemble at the rear of the court in the car park. The meeting is being recorded and will be streamed to YouTube. Any members of the public present should be aware that they may be recorded even if they are not participating in the meeting. If this causes you any concern, can you please let me know now? Seeing anybody raising concerns or hands? Okay. In that case, please could I remind attendees that are present online to turn their cameras off and mute their microphone until they are invited to speak. Thank you. Okay, item 1 on our agenda is apologies, Josh.
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies from Councillor Henley and Councillor Marcus Kravis is substituting in, and apologies from Councillor Derek Perry and Councillor Habib Farbahai.
Okay, anybody have any other? No, we're all present. Apart from that, that's excellent. Thank you. Right, item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting. Our last meeting was June the 23rd. The minutes are have been provided. I would just like to know if you are content that they are a true record. If I may have a proposal, or if there are any objections or
we're going to make that change, won't we?
We're going to make that one change. Yes, the word has escaped. Can you remind me?
NHS Foundation.
Ah, yes, yes. In the meeting notes, it is at page 14. Page 14. Yeah, it's changed on my copy. That's why I was confused, because on my copy the sign has been changed, and that it wasn't entirely clear. That the chair brought in the strategic planning from the Somerset NHS Foundation Trust at that point, which confirmed that the majority of people using accommodation would be single. There's no confirmation of that, and that again was repeated because it wasn't clear who that individual was. So that title has been repeated in the notes. So my apologies for that. And is it your will that I sign them as a true record? Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Norman, and a seconder, please. Thank you, Nick. So that's Norman and Nick. Right. I have now signed those. Thank you. So declarations of interest. Declarations of interest. Well.
Thank you. For item number 6, the Milverton one, I'm the local member. And also 1 or 2 of the objectors are personal friends and acquaintances, but I have not fettered my discretion. I've read the report in detail, and whilst I made some comments earlier on, I've not fettered my discretion. I'm coming to this meeting with an open mind.
Excellent, thank you. David?
Much the same, also local member. Must admit, I haven't spotted who's speaking, but I may know objectors, so but yeah, open mind. So.
Are there any other? Sorry, Norman. My apologies.
That's right. Item 5, Monkston Heathfield development. I have another interest. I farm some of the land and I own a small piece of it. But as this report, the secretary, the solicitor has said that it's all right to stay and listen as I'm the ward member as no decision is being taken today.
Okay, thank you. Any others? No, that appears to be it for declarations of interest. So we move on to public question time now. Mr. Martin Pates is requested to speak on planning application 38220176, which was the construction of the Southern Boulevard at Fireport. Mr. Pates, if you come forward, when you're to that chair there, yeah, that's fine, lovely. If you push the right hand button, so the red light comes on. And when you're comfortable and ready, you can start your 3 minutes, sir. Okay, so whenever you're comfortable, sir. Welcome.
I wrote to the planning enforcement team on the 15th of June, complaining that I felt that some of the, thank you, 3 extra seconds. I was complaining about the possible infringement of planning consent on that particular site. I thought that was quite a reasonable thing to ask. I got the reply saying, unfortunately, I am unable to investigate or take any action as the council cannot investigate / enforce against itself. We are also currently unable to investigate breaches of conditions due to the lack of resource. Well, I've every sympathy with that team, and I'm sure they're under very stressful conditions, but I felt that I really ought to have had a better answer than that. So I lodged an official complaint, and that complaint was dealt with 7 weeks later. These are preliminary things. Okay. Okay, the questions are these? Can we stop the clock at this point? The question is coming. But that only takes 3 seconds. So I can't actually point out to you.
No.
Well, yes, okay. What can I say? Can you put the clock on again, please? I'll try and spread it out for 3 minutes if I can. Right, the question is, and this is totally absurd, but this is the question. What progress has been made on addressing apparent breaches of the planning permission? And we're talking about the South Boulevard and Fireball. And you're saying I cannot add anything about those conditions that I want to question.
Okay, I have a response, and the response is from Bill Cotton, who is the interim service director for planning at Somerset Council. As you know, I'm Simon Coles, and I'm going to read this response. You will have it in writing in your inbox, I hope, at the moment. If not, it will be there certainly by the end of this meeting. So this is from Bill Cotton. As I say, he's the interim service director for planning. Dear Mr. Pakes, thank you for your letter and question at committee, and for taking the time to raise your concerns regarding the Firepool development and surrounding public realm. I am sorry to learn of your dissatisfaction with the current condition of the site and appreciate the detailed points that you have raised. I can confirm that matters relating to compliance with the planning permission have been referred to the council's planning enforcement team, who are currently reviewing the issues that you have highlighted. They will assess the concerns raised and determine whether any further action is required. In addition, colleagues responsible for the management of the site have already commenced work to address several of the matters identified in your correspondence. Arrangements are being put into place for the watering of the landscaping for the remainder of the growing season, including interim measures currently being undertaken on site. We have also secured contractor support and are reviewing the replacement of any failed planting in accordance with contractual obligations. Furthermore, action is being taken to remove remaining materials and improve the overall presentation of the site. We recognise that the appearance and maintenance of this important regeneration site are matters of public interest and are committed to ensuring that the issues identified are addressed appropriately. Once the planning enforcement team has completed its review, we will consider their findings alongside the wider operational actions being undertaken and provide you with a further update. I'd like to thank you again for bringing these matters to our attention. Yours sincerely, Bill Cotton, Interim Service Director for Planning, Somerset Council. Now going to move on to the main part of our meeting. So we're going to move on to agenda item number 5, and that is application 14/21/0047. And this is an update report from our senior officer, Simon Fox. And so it is a report to note, we will need to discuss that at the end of Simon Fox's presentation. Simon, good afternoon to you and welcome.
Afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully a short one from me today, somewhat unusually. Just an update on progress with the Monkton Heathfield Phase 2 planning application. We are in the slightly unusual situation of providing regular updates on a single planning application, something that would commandeer much more of members' time if we were to do it on every planning application this council is processing. But this application, because of the circumstances that led to its initial recommendation for refusal and then the stay of execution provided by members so that the application could be rectified and amended, we are now in a cycle of periodic updates. The last one was actually around the end of last year, when at that time I was predicting that we may be at committee within a reasonable period. That obviously hasn't happened, and the final application hasn't come before you yet. The application has it's nearly there. The remaining issues around highways viability and some layout changes are being progressed with increased haste on behalf of the local plan authority and the applicant. Discussions continue with West Monkton Parish Council and Creech St Michael Parish Council around the recycling of their sill receipts, as alluded to in my report. And this is to ensure that the site benefits from as much of its own income as possible to provide all the facilities that this site is carrying on behalf of the Monkton Heathfield allocation in the local plan. So there is some expectation now that we're on the home straight, and it is my firm expectation that I will be before you within the next 6 months with that planning application, able to answer all of your questions, queries, and listen to the comments from the general public, who will be waiting for their day to come and talk about the merits or not of the planning application. And we are using the time to make haste with preparations for a potential Section 106 agreement at the applicant's risk. And so all the dead time that appears from the outside is being used internally to ensure that the application can proceed in as speedy a manner as possible. If there are any questions further to my report or this oral update, then I'll be happy to take them. If not, that's the update, Chair. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Simon. Ladies and gentlemen, queries, questions, comments? We've read the update report. We are where we are. It's a complicated issue, this one, and we've debated it before. It is something that, because it's part of the local plan, we need to get right. We need to get it right for everyone, not least the people of Monkton Heathfield. I'm not seeing, David.
Thank you. Yeah, a question. I mean, it's not covered in the report, but it's just sort of flagging up. And I wasn't a member of planning committee when it previously came, so I'm not familiar with the previous detail of the application. Just wish to flag up, as I often do, about the energy aspects of this application. It's always so much better if they're addressed at an early stage by the developer and by the officers. So I'm very much hoping when it comes through, we will see solar panels on the roofs, and for me, very importantly, heat pumps as the heating source. I've looked at the latest National Planning Policy Framework. It gives a lot of encouragement to those, says they should have substantial weight in the process. So I look forward to seeing that reflected in the application when it comes through. But if there's anything to say now, obviously interested.
Okay. Okay, there was a further iteration of the MPPF over the weekend. A synopsis of that is in the update sheet for today's meeting. Hopefully that will help. I don't know, Zach, have you got anything you want to say on that?
Just to clarify, the update is specifically in relation to agenda item 6, but the MPPF changes, I've just talked to Simon, and the MPPF changes that came in on the 17th of August do not amend the reports that Simon produced for this agenda in terms of Monkton Heath. No. Thank you. But noting the point that the councillor mentioned about the weight to be attached to sustainable measures, and that's noted.
So that is a report to note. Is it your wish that I note it? Thank you. Okay. So I have to have a vote. So can we vote to note it, please? Those that are eligible to vote. Thank you. That's all the eligible members on this item. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on then. Thank you, Simon. I'll let you do some work now. Agenda item 6, which is application number 23/22/0013, and it's the site at Milverton Butts Way, and it's the erection of 24 dwellings with associated works including access, parking and landscaping. And the case officer is Anthony Pick. Anthony, good afternoon and welcome. And thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon all. So its application is Butts Way for 24 dwellings, including 6 affordable houses. The first slide has got an aerial context plan. So the allocation is shown on the red line here to southwest of the village. Essentially, we've got Tuckers Mead and Courtfield development to the east, allotments, probably in line with the allotments there on the southern edge. Just in terms of sort of orientation, we've got the Milverton playing fields, the cricket club, rugby, football, located off Butts Way here. We've got the village core. In terms of public transport, there's been questions around the different bus routes. So the number 27 goes from sort of the site frontage at Courtfield. That's I think 3 days a week to Wiveliscombe and Wellington. The more frequent bus service, the closest position is around 900 metres, and that's off North Street and Wood Street, and that's the closest location. So just showing the red line of the application site, and again just showing that in context with the development to the east. Southeast there is the existing allotments. So it is a land allocated for residential development in the site allocations policy under MIN 5 at Butts Way. So initially it's indicated for around 20 dwellings, and there is a design brief which provides an illustrative way of how it could come forward. The preferred method was, in terms of access, was a connection through Tuckers Mead, but the policy does accept that if it can't be provided, then Butts Way would be the alternative access arrangements. But just moving on to the site layout. So again, we've got 24 dwellings, a mix of 1-bed to 4-bed units, 6 affordable houses, providing that 25% policy compliant. Access off Butts Way. We've got a footpath connection along the frontage, which ties into Tuckers Mead. There would be connections into the public right of way, so that provides some leisure and recreation uses, but there is no direct footpath into the village. The design guide talks about providing a link to the allotment, so the applicant has provided that link, and that'll be subject to further on sort of agreements between parties, but it does provide for that link. The design has sort of evolved. When it first initially came in, there was concerns that there was a bit of a sea of parking to the front, so we now do have a landscape buffer behind where we are going to provide that new footway, because we are having to lose a few trees along there, some landscaping, so providing a new buffer there and providing just a more of a softer softer edge sort of development to the edge of Milverton. The latest site plan shows that it provides visibility of 43 metres in either direction. It is a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, so that requirement is for 25-metre visibility, so it does provide over and above. It is accepted that we are going to lose hedgerow and trees in this. I think the red line is going to be the new footway, and then we've got an area where they're going to plant to the rear to provide some of that mitigation. Just running through a couple of the typical elevations. So we've got a mix of dwelling types. We've got, again, in terms of materials, it's evolved. It's gone from contemporary back to more of a sort of a local vernacular type traditional palette material. So we've got stone, brick and render with predominantly slate roofs. Again, we've got one block of 2 flats on site, showing just solar panels on the roof slope. Maybe if I go back, that one was again just a typical elevation. I think this is a 4-bed and just showing solar panels in this particular case on the garage. And again, just another type of development. So we've gone stone, brick, render for our slate roofs. In terms of relation to existing developments, this Tuckers Meads development to the north. So property closest to has no first floor windows. Shows a cross section through the site. So Tuckers Mead slightly elevated as the land drops down to the south. As we move around to Marden, which is the highest point of the land. So Marden is this property here, showing, yep. So in terms of side on elevation to the new plots, we've got around 17.3 metre distances, which is considered to be acceptable between elevations, between windows. And we've got the footway and also the access way and obviously some belt of landscaping provision between. Just some site context photos to take you through. So this is going from Milverton up, there's Tuckers Mead access point. This is where the new footway connection is going to be. So if we can see the garage just there on the right hand side, that's that picture. So we're just moving around. And then as we can see that straight there, that's the right hand picture. Currently the access into the field is there, but we've got a new access going in this location. Turning round, so we're now looking back at the Tuckers Mead access. Further down Courtfield, so you can just see the sort of nature of the road into Butts Way. So there are footpath connections from existing cul-de-sacs, but there is no dedicated separate footpath into Milverton. Again, just another context photo a bit further down. So left-hand side is the existing Milverton playing fields. This is actually in Milverton itself now, looking back at Butts Way. So Butts Way, Sand Street's on the left-hand side would be the Kissing Gate and the school access. And again, just a couple of photographs to show the sort of nature of the road. Into the site now, so this was the access from Tuckers Mead. Now looking at the side of the Tuckers Mead property. Looking at, so that would have been the side of this one, looking around now. So we've got Tuckers Mead rear properties into Courtfield development. You can see the sort of mix of housing types in terms of render materials. Again, it's looking generally down south. Now looking at Marden, so from this, almost from the site access looking down, Courtfield would be on the left, Marden on the right. You can see the land slopes down to the south, and the highest point is on the east, so on the west side there. Panorama, so looking back now at site access, proposed one is around here. Got the rear access of Marden. You can see Tuckers Mead in the background, and as it comes around Courtfield development, and again you can see the slope. So just some of the key planning considerations. So highways and accessibility. The Highway Authority maintains its objection. Predominantly site in Butts Way is constrained. No continuous footpath. In proximity to the footpath to the west. Landscape and character is accepted as going to be, or recognised there is going to be some change. The proposal does seek and secures landscape mitigation through planning conditions, and the residual effects are considered to be acceptable. Residential means have been assessed, and officers consider the impact with Marden, Tuckers Mead and Courtfield development to be acceptable, subject to conditions. which includes removing permitted event rights for windows. So in terms of policy IMN5, housing delivery, it does provide 24 dwellings, as mentioned, 6 affordable. There are variations to the design brief in terms of number and layout and alternative access as well, but it is part of the alternative access that is referred to in the design brief. In the technical matters, landscape officer, drainage, phosphate, ecology, always no objections proposal. And some of the wider benefits that will be secured and delivered include the affordable housing, pedestrian links to allotments and wider footpath network, access frontage works, open space, play provision, public art secured through 106 and conditions. Laptop screen's gone. Sorry, just noticed the signal disappeared. To go out and try and come back in. Cool.
Apologies, it was like technical hitch. Obviously not feeding the gerbil enough.
Thanks, Chair. And the last slide in terms of the planning balance. So as referred to and on the update sheet, there has been a new MPPF just recently issued. In terms of planning weight, so it still maintains the plan-led delivery. The site allocations policy establishes the housing principle by allocating that land for residential purposes. The new MPPF in terms of policies S3, sustainable development, S5, talks about development outside settlement limits where it's allocated for residential, and H07 provides substantial weight to meeting evidence housing need, which in this case is the 24 market houses, of which 6 are affordable. In terms of the adverse effects, the Highway Authority objection, residual accessibility concerns weigh against the proposal. There is some landscape and character harm more so the office considered acceptable in terms of securing the mitigation proposed. So new MPPF test and judgment. Policy S5 states development of allocated housing land outside settlements should be approved unless its benefits would be substantially, I think that's the change, substantially outweighed by adverse effects. So the residual highway concerns are noted and considered to substantially, not to substantially outweigh those housing benefits. With proposed mitigation, TR6 of the MPPF refusal threshold is not considered to be met. Therefore, the recommendation is for granting permission subject to conditions and completion of the 106 as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we have a number of public speakers on that. So when I call your name, if you come to the public speaking desk and sit yourself down, make yourself comfortable, push the right hand button, the red light comes on and your 3 minutes start when you begin speaking. The first speaker I've got is Mr. Tom Boxall, please. Mr. Boxall. Good afternoon and welcome.
So I'm Tom Boxall, I'm the owner and I'm the resident of the property Marden, specifically named in the adopted development plan and located adjacent to the proposed development. My wife and I bought Marden in December 2020 in the knowledge that the field next to us was an allocated development site, and as such we accepted development in accordance with that plan may take place. We did, however, feel assured that the adopted site allocations and development plan offered suitable protection to our home, with the new housing limited to the eastern part of the site with a clearly defined boundary. It's fair to say from the outset that this proposed development has ignored almost every principle stated in that plan. With the proposal as it is presented to you for consideration today, not one of these principles that was clearly defined by this local authority when this site was allocated is being followed. The application site substantially exceeds the area of land identified for development under the Min 5 policy, The southern boundary of the development should end at the southern tip of Martin's Garden, with the area to the south identified for landscape screening. Proposed plots 21 to 24 are completely outside of this area, as well as parts of plots 19 and 20. The planning officer's report is misleading to imply throughout that the site is allocated for development, when a significant part of it was specifically excluded. Neither the applicant nor the planning officer provide any justification for now using that land. I would also like to point out that we ourselves have undergone major renovation projects at Marden. As part of our application, we sought planning officer's pre-opinion on our proposal to add a full second story to our bungalow. We received a response from Case Officer Chris Mitchell on the 8th of May, stating the proposed first floor addition to the existing dwelling would not gain our officer's support. The property is sited on elevated land and therefore its increase in height would not be in keeping with neighbouring properties. There are multiple properties within this proposal sharing the same elevated position as Marden, and as such should be subject to the same restrictions. Failing this, these properties, which are proposed at a full 2-storey height, will by definition be overbearing on Marden. We fail to see how the planning authority can apply a restriction to our property and then fail to apply the same here. We're deeply concerned by the report, which focuses heavily on the approval being granted because historically sufficient approvals haven't been given. This case should be judged on its merits, not on the shortfalls of historical decisions. Where significant concerns have been raised by the Highway Authority and against the backdrop of non-compliance with the restrictions contained in the adopted development plan, I invite the committee to reject this application.
Thank you, Mr. Boxall. The next public speaker is Mr. John Townsend, who I believe is joining us online. Are you able to hear us, Mr. Townsend? Mr. Townsend, I believe you might be muted, sir. We can see your lips moving, we can't hear anything. Hang on a second. Sorry, Mr. Townsend, my apologies. We're having a technical hitch. If you hang on a moment, sir, my colleague's trying to resolve it. Bear with me a moment, sir. Mr. Townsend, we're trying to resolve that. I'm going to ask another member of the public to speak whilst we're trying to resolve that technical issue. I will not forget you. You will have your 3 minutes, sir. Councillor Sully, are you able to join us at the moment online? Indeed. Have you got sound, Andy? Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Okay. Yep. Shall I invite Mr. Townsend to do that? Yeah. Mr. Townsend, we think the technical issue might be at your end, sir. The suggestion is that he logs out and comes back in. Yeah. If you can try, I can't hear you, sir. I can see you talking, but we have no sound. So I wonder if we might invite you to log out and then log back in, and we'll take it from there, sir. Okay, in the interim, I've got the applicant and agent, Laura Polly, which I believe you're here, Laura. Excellent. If I can invite you to come forward. Sorry for the slight change in running order, but I'd like to keep the meeting on track if I can. Okay, so as ever, Laura, you're more than welcome, and please, when you're ready, push the button, the red light comes on, your 3 minutes begin at that point. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. The site is allocated for around 20 dwellings under policy MIN 5 to include 25 affordable homes. A scheme of 24 dwellings to include 6 affordable homes is therefore acceptable in principle. Access through Tuckers Mead was considered, but it was discounted for 3 reasons. Firstly, Tuckers Mead is not an adopted highway. Secondly, there are no rights of access from Tuckers Mead into the application site. And thirdly, the highway is not of a standard capable of accommodating the proposed development to an adoptable standard. Vehicle access is therefore proposed from Butts Way as allowed by MIN 5. Replacement tree planting is proposed between the new dwellings and Butts Way to mitigate this tree loss as required by the design brief. The transport statement confirms that the site access has been designed in accordance with the standing advice and provides visibility displays in excess of what's required for the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit. The scheme also makes improvements where it can, including highway widening to the front of the site and a pedestrian connection to Tuckers Mead. Discussions were held with Somerset Council's estate team about a possible pedestrian link from Butts Way to the school. However, following inspections, it became clear that the council no longer had sufficient control over that land required to deliver this route. While footway provision in Milverton is intermittent, this is typical of village settings and is mitigated by the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, street lighting and low traffic flows. The TRIX analysis confirms that the traffic from 24 homes would not be substantial and would not result in severe highway impacts. Importantly, the site's accessibility was assessed when it was allocated and found acceptable by the council and through the local plan examination process. Appeal decisions confirmed that the application process is not the occasion to reassess a site's sustainability where it has already been allocated. The layout does move away from the design brief suggestion of continuing the building line along Tuckers Mead. However, this allows a better and more efficient layout and a lower density of development. Tuckers Mead does not form a strong active street frontage, given its setback from the highway and intervening landscaping. The Butts Way frontage will also benefit from new planting, which will help to filter views of the development. Any deviation from the design brief is therefore limited and will not result in significant harm. The updated MPPF confirms that settlements include allocated land that will form part of the built-up area once developed. Policy S4 of the MPPF is therefore relevant and supports approval unless the benefits are substantially outweighed by the adverse effects. This is not the case here. The planning balance as set out in the officer's report remains relevant in light of the updated framework. Significant weight should be given to the delivery of housing, including affordable housing on an allocated site. The applicant is a local house builder and they are ready to deliver these much needed homes to include a contribution towards affordable housing. For these reasons, I respectfully ask that members support this application. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much and for putting in time. Thank you for that. Okay, Mr. Townsend, are you back with us yet? Right. Again, I can see you, Mr. Townsend.
Just saying the phone number.
Yeah, okay. Bear with me a moment. We try and re-establish contact with Mr. Townsend. Well, we're trying to find a way now. So what we're going to do then is your update sheet contains some notes, particularly on the new very latest MPPF dated 17th of August, which we now have to follow, and how that might apply on this site. Okay, so you might like to read your update sheet and consider that. And if you have any questions, I'm sure Mr. Vick will be more than happy to answer them for you. Josh, let me know when you're ready. And just for clarity, for members of the public, the update sheet is online. It has been published before the meeting and it is online. For those that are technically capable of getting there, I have my own printed copy, which tells you all you need to know.
Mr. Townsend, do you want to unmute and try and speak now?
Mr. Townsend, would you like to try and speak to us, if you can hear me? Well, I'm afraid we're not getting anywhere at the moment, Mr. Townsend. Okay, can I just check, ladies and gentlemen, you all had the opportunity to read the update sheet? I don't know if any of you have any queries or questions on it, having read it. If you do, can we have them now, please? Now, with regards to the unfortunate not being able to get Mr. Townsend online or able to hear him, I understand the clerk of Milton Parish Council is in conversation with Mr. Townsend now and will speak on his behalf in a moment or two. So it's Mr. Townsend was representing Milton Parish Council, but we now have the clerk who hopefully will be able to hear in a minute. So we're just trying to organise that. I'm sorry for the technical issues. Modern technology, don't you just love it?
Mr. Townsend, I know you've just joined. I've just spoken to your clerk. I don't know if you can speak and hear us, and we can hear you now. You just went again. Sorry, so I've spoken to Catherine, the clerk, and she said she's going to join and speak on the parish council's behalf. I can see a thumb up, so that's happy. So we're just waiting for her to join, and then she can speak on your behalf. I apologise we can't hear you. Hopefully we can hear her, otherwise I'm out of options. But we'll wait for her to join in a minute, and then she can speak on the parish council's behalf, if that's okay. Hello, Catherine. Hopefully, if you speak, we should be able to hear you.
Can you hear me all right?
We can. Lovely. So,
Fantastic.
Mr. Townsend, apologies. It appears to be your end, but I'm glad we've got somebody here from the parish council.
Yeah.
Okay, and she's right. Catherine Howard from the Parish Council. Thank you for joining us. I'm sorry for the slight delay and mix up, but we couldn't get any sound from Mr. Townsend. And we could see him, but we were not getting any audio. So if you'd like to make your representations, you have 3 minutes when you're ready. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, no problem at all. Thanks ever so much. So this is regarding the Buttsway Milverton planning application 23220013. And the details that Mr. Townend was going to talk about was specifically regarding, first of all, the buses. So the bus stops, the reference to the proximity of the new development of the local bus service, to quote, the bus stops are unserved by the number 27 bus, which provides multiple daily services to larger settlements. The statement is extremely misleading and gives the impression of a regular 6 or 7 throughout the day service. This is not the case. The 27 service runs a very limited schedule of 4 services per day from Wibeliscombe and 3 services from Wellington, and only 3 working days, Tuesday, Wednesday and Friday. No early AM, no later PM services. The other bits and pieces that we wanted to talk about were the infrastructure and Section 106 contributions, and members in the council discuss the infrastructure implications of the proposed development and consider it important that the appropriate provision is made to support both existing and future residents. The access arrangements, members reviewed the proposed vehicle access arrangements and discussed previous considerations regarding alternative access options. And the parish council remains concerned that the current design may not represent the optimum solution, and request that Somerset Council give further consideration to whether alternative arrangements have been fully explored and assessed. Biodiversity and habitat considerations. Our members expressed concern regarding the potential loss of natural habitat associated with the development. Whilst recognising that mitigation measures and tree plantings are proposed, the parish council are not yet satisfied that these measures have fully addressed the environmental impacts on the arising scheme. Sustainability and energy efficiency. The members discussed opportunities to improve the environment performance of the development. Parish Council encouraging Somerset Council and the applicant to consider the inclusion of additional sustainability measures where feasible, including renewable energy technologies, solar generation, energy conservation measures. Particular requirements regarding a construction management plan, and members noted the apparent absence of a construction management plan within the document reviewed. Given the scale of the development and its proximity to existing residents, the parish council considered the construction of traffic site management working practices and mitigation measures should be clearly identified and controlled. The council therefore requests the requirement of an appropriate construction management plan as a considered part of the determination process, please. Thank you very much.
Ms. Howard, thank you very much for your contribution, and I'm sorry again for trying to drag you into a conversation on Mr. Townsend's behalf, but thank you for putting your points so succinctly and clearly.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Pick, is there anything in those comments that you'd like to come back on?
In terms of the bus routes, I think we dealt with that through the presentation. So just setting out where the number 25 bus goes from. Yeah, so we accepted it's 3 days a week for the 27, and then 25 is the more frequent bus service, which then goes 7:35 in the morning. And that's around 900 metres from the site. So that's a daily service then to Taunton. Construction management plan should be a condition of the approval, as we set out in the conditions. Ecology, there's been obviously an updated ecology report recently in terms of bats, but the previous one to that, the ecology report sets out a whole host of enhancement measures. So it was prior to BNG, so there's no 10% requirement. However, there is still a broad range of biodiversity enhancement measures that are capable of or will be secured by condition.
Thank you very much. In that case, we now come to the councillors. Councillors, I'll move to the divisional members first. Will?
Okay, well, I was going to listen to what others had to say, but I'm more than happy to kick off. As I think has been accepted that I have reservations about this. I don't have reservations about the principle of development on this site. I was parish clerk when the last local plan was developed about 10 or 12 years ago, so I was instrumental in that, and I went to the examination in public, and this site arose out of that. So I don't think there is any question about the inclusion or the suitability of this site for residential development. It's there in the plan. However, I think the plan itself has come forward, and we've heard that it was the original intention was it should be accessed through Tuckers Mead. So the access from where it currently is proposed, I think is inadequate. Well, I mean, it's adequate for the development, but I think it's highly problematic and dangerous. For example, there's a garden gate dead opposite for a start. One of the things the presentation didn't show was about 150 yards up the road. There's an entrance to the herb farm, which regularly has made large HGVs delivering loads of baled herbs basically to it. So there is HGV traffic up and down the road. But I think the real problem is, in a way, that the argument that Tuckers Mead isn't available. And I see in the report that historic discussions took place with Falcon Rural Housing in relation to access through Tuckers Mead. This is on page 6 of the update. No written correspondence is held on file. I personally spoke to the chief executive of Falcon Rural Housing last week, who confirmed to me that at no stage of any discussions about using the access through Tuckers Mead taken place. So I think that for me is a real problem. It's certainly what was envisaged when the plan came forward, and doesn't seem to have been adequately explored at all. And the agent's explanation that the surface is inadequate, etc., well, I mean, that's the problem of any access to any development anywhere. It's just a question that the developer has to cope with it and presumably pay for it, which may be the reason for the hesitation here. So I think I have an issue with the access per se, and I think that it hasn't been adequately explored. If you go back to page 3 of the update, and you look at the 4th paragraph, talking about the revised NPPF, states that development should be refused where it would be to have a severe adverse impact on transport network or an unacceptable impact on highway safety. And we have in front of us, of course, an objection from Highways, which has not been withdrawn in the face of this application. And we've all sat on planning applications where local people have expressed considerable reservations about highway safety, where Highways have come back and said, no, it's okay. And so we are always instructed to go with the Highways opinion, except it would appear in this case when we're expected to ignore it, which I find somewhat perplexing, shall we say. As I say, it's particularly there is an alternative into this site. There is a landscape access to this. I mean, if you come down Butts Way from top, it's a lovely little entrance to the village, which will be altered forever. I made these points in my initial comments, and I accept that if you're going to do this, then you can try and do your best job, but it will inevitably suburbanize the entrance to the village, which, of course, with a heritage village like Milverton, is a concern. The last point I wanted to raise was the vexed question of the footpath through to the school, because one of the Highways complaints is about the lack of adequate footbay down Butts Way, and I do walk up it regularly, and it can be a bit hairy, particularly after dark. And although this is the fact that officers have dismissed it as an option, these are council officers have dismissed it as an option, I find extraordinary. This isn't necessarily a problem for the developer, but at officer level to write off a piece of ground that the council a valuable piece of ground that the council owns and say it's nothing to do with us anymore, I think is inadequate. So I have tried to get hold of the officer again, who is on long-term absence, and the estates officer I'm trying to track down actually returned from leave this morning. So I have no further information on that, except to be exceedingly frustrated because the land was singled out when the Oland site was sold back in the 1990s, specifically for for a footpath to the school, and for the council just to sort of give it up. Makes me very cross. But as I say, this isn't necessarily a problem for the developer, but anyway, it's a local member issue. The final point is, I think there was a reference in the section 106 to play area equipment. I think the parish council may wish to have an input into that because they've just successfully raised rather a lot of money to completely refurbish the play area. And so whether that kind of money would be needed for that or could potentially go somewhere else, I think is a discussion that could be had. I think on balance at the moment, I would quite like the committee to consider deferring this to look further at some of the points that I've raised, but I'm really interested to hear what everybody else thinks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. David? And then
Okay, thank you. I will say, Will and I have not discussed this at all. We're hearing what each have got to say at the meeting today. And well, yeah, so right, a few comments I'd like to make. One, I would agree with what's just been said about Tuckers Mead and mentioned by the parish council in terms of it doesn't feel like the access off Butts Way has been sufficiently explored in terms of looking at the options. There's been some difficulties mentioned, but to an extent they sound as though they could be overcome, and it does feel as though a more serious attempt should be made to try and share the access with Tuckers Mead, so two separate accesses are not needed onto Butts Way. Other points, obviously I've been noting what's been said about the footpath. I particularly looked at the original design brief to see what that had to say, which is clearly important, and there's been comment about how you can't change that. And so I think it's important to say that design brief did specifically say, which hasn't been brought up yet, that there should be safe pedestrian routes. So it was anticipated that there would be safe pedestrian routes, and that is not what we've ended up with. So I think it does go back. I think there is something in the design brief which has been missed and not addressed. That's how it looks to me. And I was wondering about this footpath link. I think the expression in the report was that the council has lost it. Lost was the word used. Now, I don't know quite what that means. I believe the land in question is still there. It's not disappeared. So what does lost mean? It's a rather bizarre expression to make. Is it in some other ownership? We're not told. And there was reference earlier today about not having sufficient control on it, but we're not being told what's going on here. That seems really rather an odd situation. And
understand that I'm going to allow the officers to answer the queries that you've raised when you finish raising them, but I'm going to give them the opportunity to answer your questions.
Yeah, sure, yeah. And obviously, if that clarification can be provided, that of course is welcome. So good. So there is a concern about that, and clearly the footpath, and I don't know. I'm guessing where it goes. To be honest, I don't know. I'm guessing, but you're just looking what's needed. But I don't actually know specifically where the land we're talking about. I'm guessing, and it's talked about that it, and I'm guessing partly from the fact that it means you don't have to walk in the road down Lower Butts Way. So that's the bit that's being avoided, but it clearly doesn't provide a complete alternative, but it does provide a beneficial alternative, which would be good to see, especially as we're talking about access to the primary school. Okay, further points. I have got some comments in relation to energy. It looks clear that solar panels will be provided on all the dwellings, is what I've understood. I would like to check that that is completely secure, because the only sort of certain reference to it seems to be on the drawing, on the revised drawing. Now that may be enough, and the drawing indicates that the buildings will all have solar panels, so that's good. But that again, that is really a question. Can we be certain and that they will be delivered? I was disappointed in the climate checklist, because it doesn't really say as much as I would like it to. This is something this council takes seriously. We've got the climate positive planning in place, the climate emergency declaration. It's something we've flagged up that is taken seriously by this council, and we've got specific policy that applies in the West area. We've also got the new National Planning Policy Framework. After the supplement came around this morning, I downloaded the new one to see what it's got to say. Page 29 is where I was quite comforted to see. I won't look it up, but that's where it's got the substantial weight given to solar panels and heat pumps. So I would like to see heat pumps on these buildings. They're so beneficial to the energy performance, so beneficial to the future owners that maybe it's planned, but again, it's not stated. So I would like to see that in there. Concerned about a small established wood area being lost. The construction plan it sounds that it can be dealt with, but I've looked through. I can't see it in the conditions. So I think it sounds like a condition that needs to be added, unless I have somehow missed it from looking through twice for it now. And just finally, looking at the design brief and the comments we had in relation to Marden earlier, and the design brief is relevant. So I was interested in what was being said there. So my machine's frozen. Okay, so I got page 1 of Appendix C. It won't take me to page 2, which is the 2 pages I downloaded. Anyway, the drawing does show that a green area of landscaping to the south of Marden, and there are comments on this on page 135, the second page of the design brief, which do talk about, I've forgotten the exact wording. Although part of it's at the bottom here, a strong, but I think the site more important on the next page, a strong landscape boundary should be created on the higher land to the west, and care will need to be taken to avoid the development having an overbearing impact on Marden. And it does appear that, especially to the south, that has not been done as envisaged by the original design brief. Thank you.
I think in fairness, we need to let the officers come back on some of those comments before we get lost in the discussion. So if you don't mind waiting a moment or two, Andy, I'm going to get the officers to respond, and then we'll proceed from there. Gentlemen.
Thank you. I'll bring Anthony in to discuss the access from Tucker's Mead that was referred to, and the footpath issue. The other two issues, totally understand where the councillor's coming from in terms of Marden. Obviously, and I heard the resident of that property talking about how his planning application was refused, or he was encouraged not to go forward with that. Obviously, that's not part of the consideration today. What we're considering is the relationship between the two, the new properties and that property, which is an important material consideration. Obviously, members will take their own view about the relationship there and whether it's acceptable. But as Anthony pointed out with his plans and in the presentation, there are no first floor windows proposed. Marden is set at a higher level than the existing properties, and we don't believe the relationship is so harmful that it would justify refusal on those grounds. But that's our opinion. You're the decision maker. The point about the footpath, or the opportunity for the footpath being lost, I believe that the reference is about adverse possession, because under law, and I'm sure our solicitor will correct me if I'm wrong, people, if a piece of land is not claimed, if it's claimed by someone else and used for another purpose for a period of more than 12 years, they can claim adverse possession over that land. And I think that's the point that the colleague was making. And now I'll just bring Anthony in on the footpath and Tuckers Mead issues.
Thanks, Zach. And just to highlight what Zach was talking about, just so you got location of the context of where the footpath we're talking about. So it's obviously the primary school location. So further down, that's why here's the application site. And then the footpath proposal previously was there. And then there's the question now about adverse possessions. There's no application in for it, but that was the concern internally about if somebody did seek to do an adverse possession order, it'd be difficult to refute that. So that's where the concerns were from. So if we can zoom in on.
Anthony, would you mind? Anthony,
Yeah,
can
so
you
I
repeat
just
what you said?
just showing that
Thank you.
that context. So just further to what Zach was talking about, there's the application site, just so you can see the area, primary school here. So the council still own the land. The concern internally from the estates team was that if there was an adverse possession order served, then it'd be difficult to refute given the time that that's been used, but no application in. So that's where that commentary has come back from. In terms of Tuckers Mead, so there has been a lot of discussion with agent throughout the application about opportunities and whether it is feasible to use Tuckers Mead as a more simple option to go through and access into the site. But the difficulties that the agent has sort of set out in terms of third party ownership, difficulties in terms of highway. So I spoke informally to the highway officer, and again, there are difficulties about upgrading that, whether it's feasible to upgrade that to be an adoptable standard. That was the big concern about why they then had to use Buttsway as a new access into the site. In terms of sustainability, or maybe I'll go to the construction management plan, just tick off that one first. So it is a condition. So condition 17 deals with that. In terms of solar panels, it is a mix. So certain ones do have it, certain ones don't. So there will be a condition, obviously, in accordance with the approved plan, but we could ensure put a new condition on to secure a sustainable measure, so which includes identifying those properties that have solar panels to make sure they're operational prior to occupation. Any others? Heat pumps. I don't believe that's part of the proposal at the moment, but again, a general sustainability condition could introduce the applicant to set out those sustainable requirements. Get a nod.
Just going to add a point of information about the contentious footpath, which, as I say, is not necessarily a problem for the developer, but it is registered. It is owned by the council. It is registered to the council. There has been no application for adverse possession put forward on it, and yet, as I said, the report says, well, it's lost. So if I put my scrutiny chair hat on, I will be pursuing this, and I may just have a chat with the chair of the corporate scrutiny committee as well, because this is a valuable asset, regardless of anything else, because it runs through the back of somebody's garden. So I think to just say it's lost and shrug your shoulders, frankly, isn't good enough. Anyway, that's.
You're saying it's been shrugging on the shoulder. I'm not saying. I'm not hearing.
No, well, it's not as I say. It's the planners. The officers can only go on the information they're given by the estates team.
Absolutely.
As can the developer.
Well, absolutely. I accept the point. Okay.
I think Anthony had a point.
But
it's just to clarify in terms of the access, the pedestrian frontage. So in terms of design guide. So if we can see actually on this photograph, we've got the Tuckers Mead footway. Now it is limited and short, but obviously the new access off Buttsway to the site provides a new footway. So it provides a safe refuge rather than when vehicles come from rural areas. It is a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, so that's as far as this application can secure. We've looked at other options, does tie into that wider footpath, public rights of way, but there just is no connection back into the village. So there is no room in terms of restricted width to have a virtual footpath or to extend the footpath into Milverton Village. So the applicant has tried to see if there's any alternatives and worked with highways, but ultimately it's just the constrained nature of Butts Way. But we do secure a footpath along the frontage. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. David?
On the footpath, and yes, feel very much the same as Will just said. There was sort of ifs an adverse possession order was done, but no statement that that has been done. So we're speculating that there's going to be problems. That does not seem, that is not the same as saying there is problems. If there's some other ownership claim, I've no idea who that might be. Is it the school? I don't know. We're not being told. It might be someone who would say, yes, please put a connection through. It would be a good thing to do. I really just don't think we've been told enough on that to say why it's not being done. And just to make things clear, there is a footpath up to the school. So what I understand is planned is to connect into that footpath to the school, and that then provides the footpath down into the village. It's just so I believe it's a relatively short connection that is being looked to add. I just don't think we've got enough information on this to take a sensible decision, because this is an important point. And so there's that. Just mentioned about the conditions on solar and heat pumps. You won't be surprised to hear that, yeah, I would favour that if that's the stage we get to today. I would like to mention I've now been allowed my wonderful machine that's allowed me access to the second page, and the other comment in the design brief, under site requirements, one of the bullet points was strong landscaped buffer on western and southern part of the site. And so again, this is an example of how the design brief does not seem to be being well followed. So that's the point from there. And I just feel there's quite a lot of sort of uncertainty and important information we haven't got before us today. We will see where it goes, but deferral to me is sounding sensible.
On that last point of the landscape buffer, I'm sure I heard Mr. Pick say that there was a landscape buffer on that western side. Do you not?
Yeah, just showing the site, the site plan up. So yeah, we've got a landscape edge to Marden on the east side there, and then the southwest corner, additional landscape, and obviously the landscape condition will be secure in the actual tree species, etc.
And it's conditioned.
Well, just to add again, quoting from the design brief, a strong landscape boundary should be created on the higher land to the west, but care will need to be taken to avoid the development having an overbearing impact on Marden. I think this is part of, and it does then talk about
the officers have conditioned a strong landscape maintenance on that border, and it's a condition of the proposal.
I think I should just complete the paragraph. The rest of the last sentence is, so this is a strong landscape boundary, and it is talking about in relation to an overbearing impact on Marden. The next sentence, same paragraph, is the southern side of the site would also require a significant landscape screen to protect views from the south. Now, there's not a lot to the south of Marsden, not immediately to the south of Marden there.
Well, only insofar as what we're getting into is, you know, members' opinion on the application, which is absolutely fine. You're here to make the decision. I can only go back to what I said earlier, in that officers have assessed the application against the design brief and in terms of the relationship with neighbouring properties. And our recommendation is that those relationships are not such that we could refuse planning permission on those grounds. But at the end of the day, you're the decision makers on this. Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, are you content for the moment? Can I move on to other councillors?
I have one or two questions, but I'll come in later because I'm really keen to hear what everybody else has to say, but thank you.
You will have the opportunity. But, okay. Andy Hadley, you were the next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I don't live anywhere near here and it's not in my patch, so I've got absolutely no axe to grind on this site whatsoever. It is difficult. It is an allocated site for development. We do need houses. We do need affordable houses. So this is a very difficult one for me. But I do agree with what Councillor Will Wren has said about the highways issues. We have come to this planning committee time and time again and wanted to refuse various things and have basically been told we can't do that because highways haven't objected. We've got no grounds to fight an appeal. We've now come to the planning department where the highways are bringing the objection, and reading their objections, they're saying to serve as a means of access for proposed development will lead to an increased risk of collisions. That's one of their reasons. Traffic movements close to an existing junction resulting in an additional hazard and inconvenience to vulnerable users of the highway. They're all health and safety grounds. If we're told to listen to them in one aspect where we really don't think it should happen, but we have no choice, why is that not the case now when it's the roles are reversed? I'm just as perplexed as Will is, to be quite honest on this one.
Wishing to put words in the officer's mouth, I suspect that they've assessed all of this against them and have reached the decision they have as professional planning officers, which is
we've got to reach the decision as a planning committee.
Absolutely.
Simple as that, really. The other point, I can sympathise with the owner of Marden. He's probably going to be quite overbearing, and I also sympathise with the people that are going to buy a house that's got no windows upstairs. To me, that seems quite a sledgehammer to crack a nut, really. But you know, that's probably not one of the reasons you'd refuse it for. But you know, that's not a very livable house if you've not got no windows up front at the back. But I'm really split on this one because I don't want the conscience of, as soon as they finished it, knocking half a dozen kids over and having a couple of car crashes on the doorstep.
I think nobody would wish to see any danger to pedestrians, whatever their age. But I do understand the point. Okay, I've got a couple of other people that want to speak before. I know Will wants to come back, and I don't know whether David does as well. But I've got Caro and then Francis, please. Oh, sorry, and then Marcus.
Yeah, I think like Councillor Hadley, this is slightly doing my head in this one, because it's a case that if you'd have stuck to the design brief, if there was provision for a safe pedestrian route to the school and into the village, if that access wasn't causing highways to have the heebie-jeebies and talking, as Councillor Hadley said, about collisions, hazard, danger to vulnerable road users, then, you know, it would be a bit of a no-brainer if you could then satisfy the sort of ecological considerations and yada yada. But there are issues with it. The biggest single problem, as I see it, with the current application is the highway, the danger. And so if you've got highways who I quite often accuse of all sorts of things, the word criminal and negligent sometimes crop up in relation to sort of speed limits, for example. Luckily, that's a 20 mile an hour along there. But if they're saying that they're concerned, deeply concerned, and there's a significant risk of collisions, hazards to vulnerable road users, then I am really scared about approving the potential of approving this as it is. I'm confused.com about how come the design brief doesn't matter. It's just a sort of few words and you can sort of interpret them how you like. And it doesn't really matter. It's just so easy to just to do it in line with the design brief. But anyway, on highways point, I want to understand if we were to, I think that the deferral is probably the way to go because I think there's more information needed. But if we agreed this today, I'm thinking, so say I bought a house there or I was in one of the affordable houses, say I have 2 children, say one is a wheelchair user, say I don't have the use of a car that day, I desperately need to get my kids to school or I need to get into the village centre. I'm like, how is that working? What is my safe pedestrian route? And I think the answer to that is there isn't one. Actually, I could just about get out on the pavement, get around to Tucker's Mead, and then I've just got road. I've got road with extra cars on, with HGVs, and I've got a long way round. Or is there some track or something? I don't understand if there isn't that safe pedestrian access as provided for, and it will exist. Then I'd be very, very worried about okaying this today because how does it exist? And this goes back to the whole highways thing. There's just too much hazard, too much danger. And I don't, yes, there's a benefit because you've got the affordable housing, but at what cost? And I don't think subjecting vulnerable road users to significant, substantial hazards is going to cut it. It's not okay.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too, as with others, understand the importance of housing, understand the importance of housing for affordable housing, social housing, and open market housing for people who want to live and work here. I've got no brief for second homes at all, but for houses for people to live in, I do have. So I started off very sympathetic to this. I'm also very clear that consultee responses are advice, particularly at highways, and it is our judgment that we have to make. But we have to be very careful before we go against the advice of people such as highways, given that my experience too is that often there is seen to be no problem when members sometimes see there is a problem, and we are at the reverse position. But I think that my remarks come under a number of heads, and a great chunk of it is about what appears to me to be not entirely clear as to what we are looking for in planning gain, as opposed to what ought to make the application acceptable or not acceptable. In planning gain, you can have discussions and arguments, but if it's not safe without that footpath, then I don't frankly care whether the council has lost it or is worried about an adverse possession or whatever. I absolutely take the point about these other committees being interested in this. But in terms of this planning application, if it isn't safe, then we shouldn't approve it. If, on the other hand, we're just looking for a bit of planning gain, that's a different question. But I'm not sure that we're always very clear which one it is. And I think I'm also concerned in the same way about the access through Tucker's Mead. Now, again, it's not my part of the world. I don't know it well, but I don't think we know really whether the question of whether it could be brought up to adoptable standard is actually something which has been thoroughly explored by the applicant and come to a firm conclusion. It might cost quite a lot of money, but that's and the other thing is, does one need an adopted road, or could it be, presumably it's not adopted, it's private access to Tucker's Mead, could it continue to be? So those, I'm not convinced by that particular argument, and I think that should be explored to the end. I am concerned about the question of whether it is a whole site, as has been described in our papers, as opposed to one of our public speakers who has I don't know, I'm not familiar with it, I'm not familiar with the original plans. that there's something very different if a part of a site was considered to be appropriate for development and a larger area is now being considered. And I would like, before I could possibly make a decision, to understand why the difference, and whether it is acceptable to have these extra bits in it. And my last thing is I'm absolutely take the point. We are here to determine or not this application, not any other, but I'm sure our officers will be turning over in their minds the kinds of advice that are being given to people when those people are deciding whether or not to make an application, when there are other matters going on in an area. And so I have moved rather from being initially very much in favour to feeling that there are a lot of questions here that have not been answered, and very specifically the ones about are we playing with planning gain, or are we playing with whether we should be approving this or not.
I would thank you for your comments, Francis. I would make the only comment I'll make back at that, of any of that, is that we are here to determine this application, and your professional planning officers have looked at all the considered it all, and their considered professional opinion is that they are comfortable with it. Now, we are the decision makers, so don't lose sight of that thought. We are the decision makers, but we need to have strong planning reasons to reject or change anything.
Sorry, Chair, we've just dropped out online, so I've just got to fix that.
Sorry, bear with me a moment. We've got a mic problem. Bear with me, people. I've got a couple more speakers, and I'm going to call a 5-minute recess. Okay. In fact, I might do that now whilst you're having it. We're going to call. I'll give you 10 minutes, Josh. Okay. So don't lose any of those thoughts. And Marcus and Nick, you're next in that order, and others, particularly those that haven't spoken, before we go back round the boy again. Okay. Okay. So you can take a short recess. When you're ready, I think we're going live now. My apologies for the delay. Okay. Now, I understand in the interim delay, Mr. Townsend, I believe you're back online, and I believe you can hear us. I'd just like to see whether we can hear you, because if we can, this time I would invite you to speak, because I know you wanted to speak and we tried and we couldn't get you. So I would like to hear your views. If we can hear you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Brilliant.
Right.
Okay.
So
Mr. Townsend.
iPhone technology over a Dell laptop.
Brilliant. Brilliant. It's better than mine, trust me. In that case, when you're comfortable, Mr. Townsend, okay, I'll bring you in when you're ready, when you're comfortable, and when you begin speaking, sir, your 3 minutes start then. Okay?
Yeah.
So when you're comfortable and ready, sir.
Right. Well, I'm happy to kick off. And to be honest with you, all I was going to do is, well, first of all, quickly thank Catherine, our clerk, for stepping in at the last moment, and wanted to just reinforce a couple of the points that have already been made, in fairness, by councillors Gwyl Wren and Dave Mansell. The access and connectivity, pedestrian connectivity is. I just wanted to put on the record on behalf of the Milverton Parish Council as well. This is of great concern, because we were led to understand that there was a strip of land, or an option on a strip of land, that would run down the back via the allotments down to the primary school, which would have been very suitable for children and young people to access the village and the primary school directly without having to walk down Butts Way. I mean, just briefly, as again has been highlighted by the pictures that were shown, yes, there is a certain amount of pavement which ends at Tuckersmead Courtfields, but beyond that there is no pavement at all. The road does narrow. It's exacerbated by parked cars as you approach the village It's also quite dark in that part of the as well, with a lot of tree growth on one side in particular. So, say revisiting the point that's already been talked about, that the parish council would like to sort of express its views that this pedestrian access that has been talked about, if Somerset Council could carefully consider how this link can be secured and maintained as part of any future development proposal. The other point was again reiterating the concern over the current access to the development itself, and again reiterating the possibility of an alternative access which is already established via Tucker's Mead. There's a road there with a junction that accesses Butts Way lower down in a wider part of Butts Way with greater visibility, etc. And finally, just apart from the other points that obviously Catherine already kindly made, the regarding the bus, etc. I know there was some talk and in the initial presentation, the first time that we saw reference to solar panels. So I note that with enthusiasm. We would encourage the use of solar panels, EV chargers, and heat pumps, if possible, to be incorporated in the development of the properties. Was a bit concerned to hear that maybe solar panels aren't being considered on all of the properties. And I would also point, I don't know whether this is the case, but I have heard in some instances that the social housing aspects of some developments have had solar panels omitted from their roofs, whereas the other properties have had solar panels. So I don't know whether that is the case for Butts Way or this proposal, but anyway, just raising my concern on that front. That's it.
Okay, Mr. Townsend, thank you. Again, our apologies that the technology let us down, but I'm glad you've been able to have.
I think it was my technology, so.
Well, whatever. We couldn't get the tech to work, so I'm very pleased you were able to have your comments heard in public. So
thank you for the time.
Thank you for your perseverance, and we'll now go back to the committee, and I'm going to turn to the. I've got two members of the committee that still haven't spoken yet. And that's Marcus Cravis and Nick O'Donnell, and then Stephen Pugsley. And then I will get back to the officers for them to make comments as appropriate, and we will see where we are at the end of that before we go around the boy again, if necessary. Okay, so Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of these might be questions actually to the officers, just trying to understand, because it was an excellent presentation. I found it. Sorry. There we go. I'll put that there, put my notebook there. A lot of them were questions because the presentation was excellent, and it's been quite an interesting application. But there were a couple of questions, and I think one of the first ones probably been touched on by the divisional members, where, well, hang on a minute, it was allocated for housing. Why wasn't this why wasn't this taken into account at the time? And it looks like it probably was. So that's the question, of how that's come about. I think it's also being touched upon the permitted development. I think Councillor Hadley pointed out, I had a question here, permitted development rights for windows were being removed. I'm thinking, what's that about? But I think that's being touched upon. One thing that hasn't was, I think it was mentioned that what I've written here, what is the TR6 threshold? Because of course it's been mentioned about highways, and actually, let's be honest, highways responding is always a result sometimes. Apparently, sorry if some councillors upset highways in the past, but I think I've been down to do that. So I had that in my mind. Well, highways have actually responded, so how bad is it? And then when you actually look at the plan and you look at what's listed, and actually it was going through my mind before it was talked about, was why have two accesses when you can have one? Or you could possibly have one, and has that been explored enough? And then I wrote down here, well, I think I wrote down just a note to myself, surely it'd be cheaper to make a road adoptable standard than to have a new access onto a highway. I'm not too sure that, I did also have a question is, what is a safe pedestrian? I don't think what my actual wording was. What is safe pedestrian access? I mean, 20 miles an hour and street lighting. Well, that's luxury compared to some of the villages that are, some of the villages that I have in my patch. So actually that would, there is that question about it. But the thing that then also was springing into my mind was, well, if this wasn't in the local plan and this was an exceptional site because of the land, what's the word I'm looking for? I think you know what I mean, because of the housing land supply, and I think the figure 3.5 is mentioned. Would the view be any different? How would we be looking at it then? But of course, there's a lot of history to this site, the fact that it's been in the local plan and how that's come about. And again, I didn't, listening to one of the public speakers, I thought, well, your initial response was, well, you bought a house next to, a piece of land that's allocated for housing, and then you look at it and you get more detail and you think, well, actually, what's now being put forward isn't what was initially intended when that land was allocated. Again, because the landing housing supply, is that enough weighting, or however we look at it, to change it? Although I take the point that actually by making it slightly different, they probably made the quality slightly better. What else did I write down? I mean, I think the bus, well, don't get me on the subject of buses, 7 buses a day possibly, or so many to one place, and that's luxury. I can't believe I'm saying in a planning meeting, but you still can't get a bus from Minehead to Bridgewater. But I think one of my main questions was with regard to, when I came to this, and I say, listening to the debate, initially I thought, well, it's 24 houses instead of 20. But then when you listen to the debate, I do think that we haven't got enough information to know why that Tuckers Mead route hasn't been considered. And actually, surely it would be beneficial to have one access into Butts Way rather than two. I'm trying to visualise driving into Milverton to see if I can think where it is. So they are really my questions. I'm just seeing if I've missed one. No. I mean, it was. What is a TR6 threshold is probably the strongest question.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Zach now for the definition of a TR6. I always thought it was I owned one back along.
It's a very good question, and of course the National Planning Policy Framework was only updated on the 17th of August, so I don't expect members to be fully au fait with all the new policies, albeit actually the TR6 threshold is very similar to that in the previous iterations of the NPPF, or at least the recent ones, in that it relates to severe impacts. But I'll read the relevant section if the chair will allow me.
Please, yeah.
So this is part 4 of TR6, which is about assessing transport impacts. And it says that development proposals should be refused if they would have a severe adverse impact on the transport network in terms of capacity and congestion, including cumulative impacts, or an unacceptable impact on highway safety, taking into account any mitigation measures proposed, as well as any wider network improvements, including measures to support sustainable patterns of movement. So what I wanted to say, because there's been a lot of points about the highway comments, and we're coming to you very openly with a highway objection on that does include highway safety grounds. What I wanted to say is we haven't ignored those, and you'll read from the report, what we're trying to do is look at the overall planning balance, and part of that planning balance is looking at both the NPPF and the fact that it's an allocated site. And I don't want to labour that point, but at the end of the day, it has been allocated. It's been identified as a suitable site for housing. So then we go to the crux of what members will be determining or want to determine in this application is the policy S5 of the new NPPF, which talks about the principle of development outside settlements. And as set out in the update report, it says only certain forms of development should be approved outside settlements as set out in the following list. And then there's a list as long as you're on. These should be approved unless the benefits of doing so would be substantially outweighed by any adverse effects when assessed against the national decision-making policies in the framework. And the reason I mention that is a change in the NPPF. It gives greater weight in that previously you just had to demonstrate that the adverse impacts were significantly and demonstrably more outweighed the benefits. Now they have to substantially outweigh the benefits. Now we acknowledge that there's highway safety impacts here, and obviously as members you're perfectly entitled to give those the weight, apportion the certain amount of weight to that you need to. But in converse, we have an allocated site in a situation where we don't have a 5-year land supply. If this wasn't allocated and we didn't have a 5-year land supply, I expect the recommendation would be a very different one before you. But we've looked at the overall planning balance, so I'd hate for members to think that we're just being gung ho and ignoring highways. That's not the point at all. And I have, have personally discussed this with the development manager for highways, so they're well aware of our position. But the only other things we would say is obviously there are certain mitigating factors in that it is a 20-mile-an-hour zone, and I think that's something to bear in mind. And I don't believe that there'll be huge amounts of HGVs that go up there, albeit that's supposition on my part. So you shouldn't give significant weight to my comment there. But I think the point I'm really trying to make is this is a difficult one. This is a balance, and you have to look at all of the, you can't just look at it and say there's a highway safety objection, ipso facto, it's refused. You have to weigh everything into balance, including the fact it's allocated, and the fact we can't demonstrate a 5-year land supply, and the fact that we have explored alternatives in terms of the comments made. But ultimately, we'll leave the decision to you as the elected members. So I wasn't going to say much more than that, really. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for clarification on it's not a triumph. Thank you for the explanation on the TR6 and the changes that apply from the 17th of August. I'm going to go back to the councillors that haven't spoken yet, and that's Nick, you're next, and then Stephen Pugsley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think the highways issue has been probably well and truly chewed over here, and I have every sympathy with all the arguments that have been placed here. We live in a developing world now where we really prioritise active travel and safe active travel, and there is no safe active travel. Highways have even identified there's no real safe pedestrian, and I would say there's no real good active travel here from this site. So I do think that's a really big issue that has to be addressed. The other thing that I just wanted to address was something that was mentioned by the owner of Marden. Sorry, I've forgotten your name, but which hadn't actually been addressed since, is that when he bought the property, well, Marcus has slightly alluded to it. When he bought the property, he was perfectly aware that development was coming to that side. But his big question, which hasn't been addressed now, is what about the south side? And Anthony, if you can go up to slide 3. Yeah, so looking at it, I'm assuming the purple bit was for development and the green bit was going to be for landscaping. Yeah, suddenly we've got houses. Well, yes. So, but I was wondering if this was a bit of a development creep or gone beyond the design.
No. The point is the allocation is the red line that you can see there.
Yeah.
That's the local plan allocation. This was part of the design brief, which suggested a way that the 20 houses could be developed, but that's nothing to stop them, looking at an alternative way of providing it. And they've departed from the brief and the policy in any case, because the policy did talk about up to 20. and we've now got 24.
Or-
But there's
Oh,
still significant
Yeah,
areas of
one
green
of
space
which
that
can't
are
have
south.
windows in the upstairs because it's. So I was wondering whether, are
Actually,
we
you
looking
look-
at the
you have to look
design?
at that. There is one on, to put that blank wall in context,
Yeah.
because it's because it directly or would directly be overlooked, and that's why there are no windows there.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean, as was alluded to, that people won't be able to see. You know, yes, there are no windows. That's for a particularly good reason. But having a wall without a window doesn't mean that it's an unusable space.
I'd also, Chair, through you, say it's absolutely not an uncommon situation at all for a side wall on a property not to have any windows. It does actually have a window proposed on the ground floor, but no first floor, and that's to protect the property to the north. But it's not uncommon for side elevations not to have windows. In fact, my own house is new and doesn't have a
Well, I
side
just
window.
wanted to check, part of that there wasn't a bit of development creep there and that actually they've gone beyond the design brief.
Okay. Stephen.
Possible, Mr. Chairman, to have some of the designs of the houses put back up, specifying the materials? Thank you. No, well, that'll do. Thank you. Oh, yeah, that next one would be fine. But then, yeah. So, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Poland and Krakow and the city of Nowa Huta, which the Russians very graciously bestowed on the Polish people, basically to put right next to historic Krakow so that they could spite it with a new factory city after the war. And I have to say, this reminds me a little bit of Nowa Huta being put down on Milverton. In his comments, which are printed on page 35, Councillor Wren quotes the 2007 Conservation Area Appraisal. Milverton is of interest in that the historic form and spatial character of the settlement has not been greatly obscured by modern development. There remains a very close and tangible connection between the village and surrounding rural landscape, which has often been lost elsewhere. And personally, I think that is important because when you then go back to the officer report on page 31, 4.8, rather baldly, we just get the site is not within a conservation area. There are no listed buildings within the immediate locality. The Milverton Conservation Area lies further to the east. The site is not within the National Landscape Designation. Well, I would contend that Milverton is actually one of the most important and attractive historic settlements in the entire county. And anything that we do to add development to it, I think needs to be handled with great sensitivity. I do not believe this has been at all. We have this phrase now, don't we? Placemaking. We need to be placemaking, consider placemaking. I don't think this respects place at all. We don't have to have a pastiche in our developments, particularly in relation to historic settlements, but we should at least respect what has gone before. And I have to say, in addition to all of the other arguments that have been put forward, I think this is really poor, really, really poor. And I don't think we should just ignore that as part of our discussion this afternoon. I think we should acknowledge the fact that what is before us is really not very good. It's great that we're getting more affordable homes here, but that has been proved on countless occasions in other settlements across Somerset can be achieved in a way that is cost effective and respects the local idiom. This doesn't, and I really feel that we should raise concerns about that.
Thank you. Right, before we go round the boy again, gentlemen, do you have anything you wish to say?
I mean, that's that's a perfectly valid position to take if, as a member. You are you're not just, just because the site's allocated doesn't mean you're duty bound to accept what's put before you. If members felt that the design or layout, the placemaking principles hadn't been complied with, then that's a position that you could take. Officers have looked at this, they've worked with it. Obviously, the placemaking officer has made some comments you'd have seen in the report. They acknowledge that it's much better than it was. There have been various iterations of the scheme in conjunction with officers, but and we believe that well, obviously we stand by the recommendation, but that would be a perfectly legitimate position for members to take should they not wish to support the application, setting aside the highways issues that have been debated at length. Is that fair enough?
Can I thank Officer Elwood for that comment? Because I personally feel it is something that we do need to take into account in any decision that we make this afternoon. And I look at Councillor Wren in saying that.
Okay, right. We've been around once. I'm quite happy to go around again, but just making sure nobody else wants to. Nobody else. It's only you that haven't spoken, Norman, myself. I just don't want you to feel left out, Norman.
No, Mr. Chairman, I would be reiterating much of what has been said already.
You might. Okay, Will?
Yeah, I thought it would be. I'm really grateful for the comments that have been made, and I was going to sort of sum up and give my sort of final position on this. But I had a couple of questions first. The first one was actually the exceedance of the original development, which has already been answered, which is, to my shame, I hadn't actually picked up on that we were gone beyond the original brief. So I think it is a valid point of concern. But nevertheless, if you're going to put a housing estate in, you actually have to sort of make it, you have to make it work. Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask a specific question about the drains, because I think they would change, it was changed from attenuation ponds to underground crates. Now, from a personal and really prejudiced perspective, I really hate underground crates. I think they are present a maintenance nightmare. I'm also conscious of the fact that they seem to be standalone. There is no watercourse within about at least quarter of a mile of it for them to drain into. So I'm assuming, and I would like clarification from the officers, that these are porous crates that will fill up and attenuate and gradually, slowly release water into the surrounding ground. The only point I would make in terms of that was that in, I think it was the 12th of May, 2023, for the second time in 15 months, the village suffered a catastrophic flooding event, a sort of water bomb on the hills above. Torrents through the village, centre of the village was flooded, and at least 21 houses received flooding. So, whilst it doesn't happen very often, when it does happen, and running off paved spaces, this is a potential problem, and I am quite concerned at the adequacy of these crates, particularly if they're supposed to just sort of take the water and soak it away through the soil. So I wanted to raise that. I think on the other hand, the other point I hadn't really considered, because as you can imagine, most of my attention had been taken on the access arrangements and the safety in the road. I hadn't fully considered the point that Councillor Pugsley had just made. Now, if you look at Tucker's Mead and you look at the nearby Courtfield estate, which was a council estate, all the houses are white rendered. And I think, looking at the designs that have just been flashed up, we're talking about stone fronting. And I think it might even be grey stone fronting. Well, if you drive through Milverton, you cannot repair any of the heritage buildings unless you use Captain Stone, because it's, these are listed buildings, and declaring interest, I own one, so I know this. And so to put sort of something really strange, and as I say, I'm grateful for Stephen Pugsley for mentioning this, an alien from that visual point of view seems a bit strange. The other point I think was, as was mentioned, the conservation area importance was perhaps dismissed, if dismissed isn't too strong a word. It's about, the edge of the conservation area is about 200 yards down the road, but the conservation is a function of its setting. And the setting is in a wooded area. If you look at the local plan, it has, this is on the edge of the wooded vales landscape area. And so trees and large hedges and wooded copses are very important, and a little copse is going to be destroyed by this, by the access. I also remember the ill-fated Natara development down at the bottom of Creedwell, which lost an appeal simply because of its impact on the conservation area. That was one of the main reasons. So I think, as Stephen Pugsley points out, and I live there, I'm very proud of Milverton. It is one of the best, if not the best heritage village in Somerset. And as been said, we need to be very careful with it. So anyway, to sort of sum up from my perspective, I fully accept that this is a development site for residential development. And it would, if passed, convey considerable benefit on the village, young families, potentially, hopefully, SIL payments and contributions towards local facilities as through a Section 106. So there are clear benefits associated with this. However, set against that, we have Upper Butts Way, which is, I think, really tricky anyway, and Lower Butts Way. I mean, Anthony, can you put up the picture of Lower Butts Way again, please? Now, if you see the picture on the left-hand side, this is where it intersects with Sand Street down in the village. All those cars are parked up there. There is a permanent on-road car park up there. So any pedestrians, and that is a pedestrian walkway up to Courtfields and beyond, and this new development. So it is tricky, which is why the parish council and myself are really passionate against getting this off-road path, if we can get it delivered. And I understand the difficulties associated with council ownership and things like that, which I intend to pursue, which brings me back to my proposal. And I would like a formal proposal to defer this application until we have more information. You're shaking your head, but I'm going to put it forward anyway. More information about the access through Tuckers Mead and the status of the council land that could provide an alternative pedestrian route.
Hang on a second. Just on that point, if that's the way the committee wishes to go, then so be it. However, I would make the point that a deferral doesn't achieve anything unless we are entirely happy to see this appealed against that. So we need to be careful what we wish for and what we do, because it's really, really important that we get this right for everybody concerned. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we are going in a direction that is sustainable and of benefit rather than of limited or lesser benefit. Okay, so I want to hear everybody. I want everybody to have their say before we get to a proposal and a vote on anything, whether that's, you know, deferral or refusal or whatever. Because there are implications for whichever of the three potential routes: approval, refusal, deferral. Yeah, there are potential pitfalls in each of those routes, and we need to be very conscious of them, that we are able to achieve what we are seeking to achieve and not making it harder. So I don't want to go rushing off on any particular route at this moment in time, because the other councillors have not had the opportunity to speak. We haven't heard our officers' advice on which position might be a better one to attempt to defend or otherwise.
I've merely put the proposal on the record, Chair.
We can put it on record by all means. I have no objection to that at all, Will. I just want to make sure that we do this with our eyes open. Okay? That's my cautionary note. Okay. Sorry, David, did you want to come in now? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
I'm processing and taking, on board what's being said. I mean, I'd be happy to second deferral, and that was sort of an early feeling of mine that there is information lacking here, especially on those 2 points that have been raised, and part of the problem is another part of the council. It appears, which owns a bit of land, which can unlock a big improvement to this scheme. So, and Gwil's clearly been pursuing that, and so there seems to be something to pursue there, and equally some doubt on because there look to be options for the other access through Tucker's Mead. Can we have some, a little bit more certain information on what the issues are there? So what I'm hearing at the moment, I'd be happy to second that. I would like a little bit more clarity on the energy aspects, just as an addendum to that. I think they're the big two factors that we could do. I'd be interested to hear if others have got comments on the pluses and minuses. I'm hearing what you said, and I'm trying to think what are the other ones. And sort of in the circumstances, if we feel these are important things, it feels like we should refuse on these grounds. But that's a little bit difficult when there's a degree of uncertainty on them. So I'm inclining towards deferral, but interested to hear what others say.
Thank you, Chair. Again, like I say, I'm not from the area, and I bow to the better knowledge of the councillors that are. But we have got to determine the application in front of us, and a deferral wouldn't change the application. It would just bring further information forward, as far as I'm aware. And one of my biggest problem with this application at the moment is actually the access and the safety aspects of it. And at the moment, that wouldn't be altered or changed by deferring it, because that would be a change to the application. And I don't think that is what would come forward from a deferral. And the other thing, yeah.
This is precisely why I want everybody to be clear about what it is that they are voting for.
I mean, of course, the other aspect that Stephen brought up, which was actually agreed by Gwil, was the house types and the materials that they used and everything else. That wouldn't be changed by a deferral, because the application is what it is in front of us. That's my concern. I'm starting to edge towards, if we don't like what it is, we should refuse it. And if they want to come back with a better scheme, that is the way to take it forward.
Hold that thought, okay, because it's a valid thought in my view. Norman, I don't want to leave you out. No, okay. Oh, sorry, Zach, you want to come in on something? Hang on a second, Stephen. Marcus?
Yes, sorry, apologies for sort of butting in here. I mean, I hear what's being said. I tend to agree with Councillor Hadley that deferral wouldn't necessarily, because this is an application that's been in for 3 years, and we have, believe us, officers have been working very closely with the developer's agent to try and resolve these issues, and we haven't been able to, hence a recommendation which may be, in some people's opinions, suboptimal. Having said that, one thing I wanted to correct was, obviously, if members wanted to defer for a specific reason to allow the developer to look at the house types or the materials, then that would be an option, but it still wouldn't overcome if members had concerns about highway safety or the active travel linkages. And while I'm speaking, if I may, I just in defence of officers, I hope this doesn't sound too defensive, but 4.8, paragraph 4.8, which you mentioned, Councillor Pugsley, that was a factual section in the site and surrounding section. It wasn't meant to be a critique or a commentary on the beauty or otherwise of Milverton. It was just a factual position about what allocations are there. And then in terms of 11 point, I'll just turn members' attention to 11.9, which is the section on drainage and flood risk, because there were some concerns raised about crates. And yes, I think Councillor Wren is very knowledgeable. The crate idea is that it provides additional storage underneath the development, whereby water goes into these crates, it's stored, and then it's released very slowly into the surrounding. As my understanding, I'm not a technical person, but my understanding that's exactly what that there for. And I accept that there may have been flooding in the past, but the section, we have consulted the LFA, they haven't objected, and it is in flood zone 1, which is at the lowest risk. So, you know, I'm not naive. I can hear where this one may be going, but I would urge members not to go down the route of refusing on drainage grounds. To be fair.
Okay. Stephen, did you want to come back?
I was only going to say I entirely respect what Officer Elwood has just said about the planning officers and the work that they've done, and the advice that they give us, because they have a difficult job. And I think that the report before us this afternoon is actually very clear and gives us plenty of steer for which we as members can then take further consideration. But this is before us as members to take the decision. It's not an office decision. They've put the facts, information, plans, designs before us. I think that the general drift of the debate this afternoon has been a level of dissatisfaction with this application, which to my mind has crystallised around access, for which highways do actually give us quite clear reasons for refusal. And also, although it was being introduced late into the conversation, but I think it was always inherent in the reports and what Councillor Wren had submitted earlier, that the design and potential layout, but particularly the design of the proposed houses, is insufficiently of high enough quality. It's not of high enough quality to respect the proximity of the conservation area and the significant nature of Milverton as a community. And I think that that is something that should bear with us very heavily this afternoon. So for those two reasons, myself, I would say that it is better to be clear cut and with respect rather than defer. It would be better for us this afternoon to refuse on highways and design grounds. And then if the applicant wishes to come back with something, I hope that will be better, that we can consider at a later date, then I would welcome that. But I don't think this afternoon we've got it.
I think that's entirely accurate. I've got Marcus and then Francis, please.
Thank you. At this current time, I'm tempted to second Stephen's proposal. But Mike, I did have one question I didn't write that I wrote down and with my writing couldn't read it. Was during the presentation we said you'd moved away from a more contemporary design. Now, obviously, I happen to agree with the issues on the design. I did mention it earlier, and I just wondered how those conversations went. So how we got from a contemporary design that doesn't necessarily have to look bad. We've got contemporary buildings in Exmoor, yeah, to what it's been described as by my learned colleague on my left. So I think that was that. And then I could talk about the deferral. And I think that issue on the land of who owns it. I mean, it turns out that I paid £200 a year for a piece of land owned by the council in Wren. And then when I asked, can I buy it? They said, we can't find it. If I had more time, me and co-pilot would ask for the money back. So that's the question, is how we move from that contemporary initial of contemporary, and I don't know what obviously is different definition of contemporary to what we've got now, and then I'll decide whether I'm going to second Stephen's proposal.
I'll ask the officers about the contemporary design, but before I do, I'll bring Francis in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm I think inclining towards the points that Councillor Posley has put forward, and I would want to add this is a site where we do expect there to be an application for housing. Nothing we're saying today does not expect that. So we do expect another application. We just hope it will support in its design, the specialness of its location, and that it will address the matters of safety that we have been concerned about. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Francis. Carol, Carol, you want to come in? Yeah, please do.
Yeah, where I'm at is I just think that the highways issues, the safety are so severe and so significant that they don't outweigh the benefits of having some extra affordable housing. They just really, really don't. I'm sorry, they do outweigh.
I'm with the rest of the panel. I just can't vote for something that I've been told is unsafe. Yeah.
It might have been a point in my discussion. It is really, there've been various renditions of trying to secure a better design since the original one. So I think a contemporary it can be appropriate. It's just about sense of place. So the placemaking officer had concerns that his contemporary would have been right in a certain context, but not edge of village. So I think the default went back to more traditional render, brick, slate roofs. So that's how it sort of got to this point.
Okay, David, do you want to come back? I don't want to propose at this stage. Okay, we're not at a proposal stage. That will happen. Okay, I don't consider that we are at the point of a proposal right now. I think there are still things to be said. Okay, I'm inviting people to.
I wanted to say something. I'm not quite sure what you're telling me, but I don't understand. Sorry.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, of course you are. Of course you are. What I didn't want to do is I don't want to jump the gun. Okay, don't want to jump the gun. I'm awaiting a proposal, but I don't think that comes now because there's some officer advice I want to get out there. Okay, to make sure we all know exactly what we're doing and where we're going.
I think it's best I speak. It makes it simpler.
Okay.
I think the comment just made was one of the reasons why I thought it would be helpful that I spoke, but there were others. Because Gwyll and I did talk about putting forward a deferral. I'm being swayed by the debate that we're having, and others have said they might second. I think I'm now saying I'm feeling so persuaded that if a seconder is needed, I'm happy to do that. But I'm not wishing to deter any debate. Now, if I may just talk a little bit about the grounds for that. Yeah, is that okay? Okay, good. So, and there's a number that have come out. I think two of the biggest are with the access issues and the pedestrian. I particularly wish to refer also back to the design brief, because the design brief did talk about safe pedestrian routes, and I do feel that's part of our problem, that it looks to me that we have the application is too far away from the design brief on the safe pedestrian routes. So that is one ground, because we are concerned, and we've got the highways objection which relates to that. There is also the I think it's especially on the pedestrian access into the centre of Milverton and accessing to the school. We've got the access issue also though out onto Butts Way, because that makes things worse. So those seem to be two big things. In terms of the design brief, I did wish to add in, and my computer seems to have frozen. I'm not sure. It normally happens when there's a really big file. I'm not quite sure what happens, but I rarely freeze like this. I think there's a really big file somewhere in our papers today. I don't know which it is, and that's what's causing a slight issue. Anyway, the point I wish to make was, again, referring to the design brief, there was comments in there about the landscape buffering, including on the south and the west side of it, and in relation to Marden. And I think that is a level of concern as well. So I'd like that to be in there, and also clarification on energy. But that is lower down. I think the other ones are main ones for me.
Stage, gentlemen, if you don't mind, David, I'm going to bring Zach in. Sorry, Stephen. Sorry, my apologies.
No,
Did I miss you?
No, not at all, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make something clear. I believe that Councillor Wren proposed and Councillor Mansell seconded that there should be a deferral. But you at that point said, but we need to hear more debate. What has emerged, I think, through the wider debate, to my mind, would be a preference for refusal on the grounds which I think I put forward. However, it is not appropriate for me to move that. It would be a direct negative, I think, effectively, of what they have proposed. If, however, either Councillor Wren or Councillor Mansell wish to withdraw that, then that would enable a proposal along the lines I was suggesting to come
we
forward.
appear to have taken the words out of the officer's mouth.
Oh, jolly good. But that is, of course, up to them. If, however, they wish their proposal to be put, then we'll see whether that succeeds. If it doesn't, then I would have a proposal to make.
Right, I'm just about to bring. I'm going to bring Gwyl in before I bring.
I mean, I think as soon as Councillor Hadley spoke and said, well, of course, if you defer this, it will inevitably lead to changes. And so I thought, well, actually, it stands or falls as it is. So I'm more than happy to withdraw my proposal.
Okay.
And I think Councillor Mansell.
What I would say at this point is, as we are continuing the discussion, and we don't have a new proposal proposed and seconded at this moment in time, we can go back and look at anything. All right, but in the interim, I would like to bring our senior planner in, because I think there are some pertinent points that we need to be conscious of. Are you happy with that, Dave? Yeah. Okay. So it's a blank sheet of paper currently. I'd like the senior planning officer to discuss what might happen next.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I appreciate that isn't a second, an alternative proposal at the moment, but I can sense one will be coming very shortly. And so I just wanted to give perhaps just my thoughts on a steer as to which way members could go if they were minded to refuse. And I would suggest that would be on the basis of two reasons for refusal. The first of which would relate to concerns about highway safety from the proposed access, added to the fact that the scheme does not do enough to promote sustainable modes of travel linking to the village and services, and the scheme is thereby contrary to policy TR6 of the National Planning Policy Framework and any local policies that are in line with that. And that on that basis, it's considered that the benefits arising from the development would be substantially outweighed by the adverse effects when assessed against the national decision-making policies in the National Policy Framework. So that would be the first one. Obviously, and just to be clear, my recommendation would be, because this is a different recommendation to the officer's original one, my recommendation would be, if members were minded to, that you delegate the final wording to myself in conjunction with the chair. The second reason for refusal would be around the detailed design, external materials and landscaping for the scheme are out of keeping with the overall character of the area and would be would result in material harm, contrary to policy DP 3 of the MPPF. Let me just find the actual wording because you'll want to know that because none of us are familiar with it. But DP3 talks about development proposals should respond to their context, the history, character and features of their site and the setting, so they integrate with and enhance their surroundings. So it would be some wording around the fact that it's considered development proposals would not respond positively to their context and would not integrate well with or enhance the surroundings. And that would be to do with the detailed design materials and landscaping. I would steer clear of saying harm to the setting of the conservation area because it's quite a distance away and we don't have a heritage statement. That doesn't mean that we're ignoring that, but I think that refusal reason stands on its own merits. So just to reiterate, harm to highway safety and not doing enough to promote sustainable modes of travel for pedestrians, cyclists, whatever, and then design out of keeping, contrary to national policy framework. And my request would be that you delegate the final specific wording to the chairman in conjunction with myself.
The solicitor wants to check something.
Two things you haven't mentioned, Zach. The actual design brief, with regard to the on-site layout, and also design brief with regard to the need for safety going out of the site. Do you need to mention the design brief?
I'd be very happy to mention the design brief in the final wording
And
where there's conflict.
The only other thing which I think you're going to say no to, but to help Councillor Mansell, you've mentioned a few times the solar panels and the heat pumps.
Well, thank you for prompting me. My answer on that would have been that had members been minded to grant permission, we could have added an additional condition requiring details of sustainability measures within the development, and that would have enabled us. I don't think you can refuse something specifically because it doesn't have heat pumps, but you could have added a condition requiring full details, and you could have added an informative, had you been minded to grant permission, that the council would like to see heat pumps. But I don't think that's a reason to refuse this scheme as it stands. And I think that would actually confuse matters and not add anything to the decision. But, you know, it's up to you.
Okay, so there is a proposal. It's not, sorry, there is a suggested wording. Stephen Pugsley wants to come back in. So
I'd like to
I'll
propose,
shut up now.
Chairman, if I may. May I? That we do refuse the application for two substantive reasons. Firstly, highway safety, that the proposed access is inadequate and that it does not do enough, the proposal does not do enough to promote sustainable travel. And we cite their policy TR6 of the MPPF. And secondly, that the detailed design and external materials are out of keeping with the context of the area, and that is therefore not in accordance with policy DP3 of the MPPF, and that I would like to suggest that the final terminology of the refusal is delegated to the planning officer in conjunction with yourself as chairman of the committee.
Just before you finish, Stephen, did you want to talk about the design brief?
I'm hoping that that will actually be incorporated within the detailed wording.
Sorry, I understand.
Forward.
I understand where.
However, I believe that the design brief point will be implicit in refusal 2.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Marcus.
And I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Okay. Okay. We have a live proposal on the table. It's just been articulated by Stephen and supported by Marcus, that we refuse this application on the grounds of TR6 highways and the lack of provision for sustainable pedestrian movements. Okay, and also that we look at DP3 And the final wording of that will be knocked out by Zach and I over the next few hours.
What you're going to say for a pint?
Only in your dreams, sadly. But no, we'll
Fine tuning.
we'll do the fine tuning of that to make the maximum effect. David.
If I may, I think you're going with this, but just sort of, ensuring the design brief, which is part of the local policy, local plan. So I think you're minded to include that, particularly on the pedestrian safety and the landscaping issues which are there.
Through you, Chair, and just to confirm, sorry, I was specifically focusing on the National Planning Policy Framework policies. The reason I haven't focused on the local plan policies is I need to check compliance with the national policies which take precedence. So, but the intention would be to refer to local policies where they apply.
That's why we need a little bit of extra time to fine tune it. That's the proposal. It's been proposed and seconded. Can I, to include that discussion between myself as chair and Zach as the manager, and I'd like to see those in favour of that, please. Okay, so that's everybody. It's unanimous.
Including you.
Yeah, including me. Yeah. Okay, right, ladies and gentlemen,
That's refused.
That is refused for those reasons, and full details to follow when Zach and I have had the opportunity to fine tune it.
We've still got one more item.
I know. Right, okay, so we're moving on to agenda item 7, which is the appeals. So I'm going to turn to Zach now for the appeals. And Zach, just so you know, I've got a meeting with Highways at 5:30.
Chairman, I'll try not to take 52 minutes in presenting the appeals. They're all printed off in the report, so I'm not going to read them. But the first appeal relates to Higher Beaverton Farm. Basically, it was an application for 4 separate dwellings where there was already what's called a Class Q fallback position for a barn conversion of the existing building. So what the applicant was saying is, well, we've already got permission for 4 dwellings through conversion. Why can't we just have 4 new dwellings and redesigned? Interestingly enough, the inspector looked at this and said that it's in a countryside location outside of the settlement. It's an unsustainable location. That the dwellings proposed were not necessarily characteristic of the area. And although some weight would be given to the fallback position, the fallback position was for 4 dwellings. The proposal was for 4 dwellings. So the inspector didn't see any significant weight to be attached to the benefits arising from it, and the appeal was dismissed. Any questions on that before I move on?
Quite right too.
Okay. The next one was at Stave Court, Barton. This was retention of cabin for use as a holiday let. It's retrospective. The cabin's already there. The only issue here, according to the inspector, was locational and whether it would be a sustainable location for a holiday let. But the inspector concluded, in line with the officer recommendation, the officer decision, that it's an unsuitable location in an unsustainable, an unsustainable position that's 1.5 miles from the nearest settlements, those being Boroughbridge and Stoke St Gregory. And although the appellant was trying to argue that, because it's on a holiday let, people will just be used to like walking and cycling, etc. in the area. The inspector felt that there's, you couldn't rely on that as an argument, and there's likely to be additional vehicle movements associated with that in an unsustainable location, and the appeal was dismissed. The third appeal was Sparksmore Cottage in Stoke Gumber. This was for an agricultural storage building, so this was a prior approval rather than the planning application. The main question was whether or not the building, in fact, the only question was whether or not the building was necessary for the purposes of agriculture, and we touched on this before. And it's well worth pointing out that the term is necessary for purposes of agriculture. It's not essential for the purpose of agriculture. And I think, in fairness to my officers, we do take quite a harsh line, but we're losing more and more of these appeals for prior approvals for agriculture buildings. In this instance, the officers felt that, you know, the agricultural use on the site equated to 46 sheep, and it hadn't been demonstrated, in our opinion, that it was reasonably necessary for personal agriculture. But the inspector felt that a person was unlikely to keep that amount of sheep just for a hobby, unless they were really struggling to get to sleep. They had insomnia and they needed that number of sheep. Sorry, pathetic. So that appeal was allowed, and the building can go ahead. It's a fairly standard open barn. The design is deemed appropriate for the area.
I'm still awaiting my first pole barn conversion.
Appeal 4, Edware in Wick Lanes to Guernsey. This was vehicle parking for the Hinkley Point workers. Again, it's retrospective. The inspector noted that there would be some benefits arising, economic benefits arising from this, but noted that in terms of its location, it wasn't sustainable, and that there would be highway safety issues arising from the walk from the parking area to the Hinkley campus, which is about 800 metres with no footways, not a safe journey. And the inspector also felt that providing this parking area was not sustainable in itself, because it would encourage the use of the private car, where they should be looking at other measures through the travel plan. That was dismissed. The next one is 2 appeals. They're advert consent appeals, but they're technically what are called BT street hubs, which are these sort of tall digital signs stroke, you can make emergency calls, you can call the police, all those sort of things. So they're sold as a community facility. They're being proposed quite a lot of places, but we've won appeals on these before. In the south, in Yeovil, I believe we've won appeals on these as well. But the inspector dismissed both appeals, saying that there would be a harm to the setting of the conservation area and listed buildings from these things. They're not massive, but they're alien features, and it was felt that they're in the wrong location. We're not saying they wouldn't be acceptable anywhere, but in those in that part of Minehead conservation area, they was deemed as unacceptable. They also, the inspector also, so just to go back, advertisement consents you can only consider on visual amenity and public safety, or amenity and public safety. So the inspector felt there was a harm to amenity, but also that the signs would be, the hubs would be distracting to drivers on the adjacent highway. So they were both refused on both grounds.
Okay. You have a question?
Yeah.
I wanted to come in on this because as it happened, I think I actually went to town council planning meeting on this and might have actually voted against it. But it wasn't for probably the reasons. And my question, I've got a little question.
Sorry, Marcus, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I've got a little question. Because of course, one of the points in 19, the planning officer put great weight on the fact that these were opposite and near a grade 2 railway station and goods shed. And I'm thinking at what point, I mean, because in realistic terms, and apologies to everybody, I do know the location quite well. They're not really, and I appreciate other reasons they were refused, but it's just that weight towards a goods shed that actually I think is behind another building at the time, and a railway that is, if I remember right, is almost behind another building at a time, and him ascribing great weight to those. So I just wondered how the officers felt about that, and because of course the conservation area has been mentioned. Conservation areas have been mentioned several times today already. And obviously then we got a listed building and also obviously a listed building as well, which I assume being a railway is different permitted development rights as well. So I just was surprised he ascribed great weight to that, because obviously at the same time in the same document, and sorry for boring it, but he said, well, it's a seaside location, a promenade. And I'm just trying to get my head around the general, although I happen to agree with the decision.
it's difficult, councillor Kravis, because I'm at a disadvantage because I didn't know the application. I wasn't responsible for signing it off. It would have been signed off by the team leader, presumably by Karen Ray. So I'm not particularly au fait with them. If you allow us, Anthony's got some photographs of the location, but I'll bow down to your superior.
Local knowledge.
Might be wrong, and I don't want to take up everybody's.
No, we bow down to your superior knowledge. I suppose, I'm just, this sounds like a cop out, but I'm just reporting what an independent inspector has determined.
Trying to double guess the planning inspector is never a fun game.
Oh, are we getting anywhere? No. Oh,
Because I'm conscious of time.
yeah, I'm not even sure who the case officer was. Oh, it was Anthony. It was Anthony. So Anthony, he's being silent.
That's why he's got the photos.
We just shared it internally, so just for context. So it was quite a robust appeal decision in 5 pages, which is longer than quite a few for bigger schemes. So essentially, you can see the BT kiosk at the moment. So it's quite a busy, obviously, esplanade, various structures, but there's not a lot of illumination. So I think that was also a big thing that changed. So yeah, and you see the kiosk there. So inspector refused it on, you say, setting on listed buildings, conservation area, sort of visual choosing. So that was the photo montage of what it would look like. And then just to essentially quote the inspector, visually oppressive and discordant within a seafront setting. Of course, harm to conservation area in the setting of the Grade 2 listed railway station. Hadn't demonstrated the public benefits outweighed the harm. And also he had concerns around road safety, given its illumination and changing digital displays. Would distract drivers at this busy junction, pedestrian crossing. So they're quite a strong refusal.
yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, I was a little bit surprised at the distraction to drivers argument. But kudos to the inspector.
Say trying to double against the planning inspector is a silly game.
Was actually why we said there at town council. Twice how much weight he gave to the listed building that was actually
A little bit away.
A bit thin of an argument.
No, it's a fair point, and another inspector could have taken a different view on the setting of the conservation area and listed buildings. I do have one more, sorry, although I'm at risk of being told off by Councillor Coles, who doesn't like us losing appeals. This is 39 Howard Road in Wellington. This related to a second application, so there'd been a previous refusal. It was a revised scheme for a rear extension and a front porch. The front porch extends across the whole front of the property. It was refused on the grounds of character and appearance of the area and impacts on neighbour amenity. In terms of character and appearance, the inspector noted the rear extension wouldn't be at all visible from the street scene, and also gave great weight to the fact that there are other single-storey extensions to front elevations within the vicinity. And in terms of the rear extension and the impact on neighbour amenity, there had been, the previous application was for a full 2-storey extension at the back that would have blocked out light and had an oppressive impact. This scheme was reduced to single-storey at the back only. And on those grounds, regrettably, we lost the appeal and it was allowed. But, actually, this is quite useful in itself to see where we're weighing things in the future.
Well,
looking at the scores that we seem to be ahead on this one, can I ask what our general performance is? Because the government does look on at performances in terms of winning or losing appeals. Just off the top of the head, I think we're well over the.
Somerset West is in a good position. The rest of Somerset is not quite as good, which is why I'm very jealous of our success rate at appeal.
Yeah.
honest answer is, without looking it up, I don't have those stats to hand. But absolutely, councillor Wren, I do have them in. I do have the latest stats somewhere. It's just I don't want to keep everyone off now. I look for them. Can I email you separate offline? Is that I'll email everyone with the latest position. I think we are intending to do an update to a planning committee in any case on performance, but not just on appeals, but overall. Thank you, but I'll do that.
The real worry on appeals is now we're one Somerset. It's the appeals in Somerset. So it doesn't matter how hard we try, and we're the right side by all the measures that they've had in terms of appeals. We win many, many more than we lose. That's not the case elsewhere in Somerset. And unfortunately, now it's all one set of figures. No matter how hard we try, if we're, if we don't get the support elsewhere, we could end up with the worst case scenario, which is we're not allowed to decide anything. And that's the real problem. That's the big threat between the new MPPF and stuff, is that if we end up the wrong side of some of these numbers, particularly with no 5-year HLS, it'll just take away the decision-making process, which would be, in my view, absolutely appalling for Somerset and the people of Somerset. So that's why I jealously guard my appeals. One of the reasons. The others is I don't like losing, but we know that. So.
Sorry, Chair. I don't think we're at immediate risk of that, but it's well worth keeping on top of.
I'm now going to close the meeting because I've got to go and meet Highways now, so you'll forgive me if I slope off.